Sergeant, the nominee is not here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Pull the mic. You are Dorcas Agik Owor, Senior Counsel, EBS OGW.
Yes, Honorable Speaker, sir.
Welcome to this committee. This is a parliamentary committee on appointments. It will engage you this afternoon to assess and recommend your suitability or otherwise in holding office to which His Excellency the President has nominated you as the Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya, the 9th Attorney General. Before we engage, we'll introduce ourselves to you. I'm the chairman of this committee, the Speaker of the National Assembly. On my right is the Deputy Speaker, Gladys Bose. On my left is the Clerk of the National Assembly, Samuel Njoroge. I'll invite members of the committee to introduce themselves.
Naisula Lesuda, MP Samburu West.
Kimani Shongo.
Junet Mohammed.
David Kosing, my name, MP Poko South.
Gikari David.
Masemeri, Teso South.
Abdul Rahim Daud, North Imenti Meru.
George Gitonga Murugara, Tharaka Nithi. Owen Bayer, Kilifi North.
Robert Mbui Kadiani.
Stephen Mule, Matungulu.
Didoraso Saku. Abdishurie Balambala.
Mishimboko Lekoni.
Rehab Mukami, Nyeri County.
Thank you. Nominee, you will be, for purpose of these proceedings, you will be referred to as nominee.
Understood, sir.
We will take your interaction with us on oath. So I invite you to choose, depending on your faith, whether you need the Bible, the Holy Quran, or the Gita. That is the holy book of the Hindus. Which one is in line with your faith?
The Bible, sir.
The Holy Bible. So you may be upstanding. Take the Bible in your right hand and recite the oath that will be availed to you. Move closer to the mic so that it goes on record.
I, Dorcas Agik Odom Oduor, do swear that the evidence I shall give before this committee on the matter under its consideration shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you. Take your seat and sign the oath. Give your documents to the sergeant to pass to the clerk so that he can be able to check against what we have on you. Nominee, I'll now, you're ready? You are ready?
Yes, I am, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, honorable members. For the record, I know the nominee very well in my long years of practice of the law. We have interacted with the nominee when she worked in the Attorney General's chambers in the old constitution and after her transition to the new constitution. She's somebody we've worked with in cases, sometimes on the same side, sometimes on opposite sides. That notwithstanding, it will not impair my ability to engage her, to find her suitability or otherwise. Nominee Dorcas, we invite you to introduce yourself by telling this committee your name, your educational background, your work experience, and above all, your competences that make you think you're suitable to hold the office to which you have been nominated for consideration for appointment.
Honorable Speaker.
In 5 minutes.
Honorable Speaker, sir, I had prepared an opening statement to introduce myself. May I proceed?
Go ahead, I'll give you room to do that. It's less than 5 minutes?
It will be.
Okay.
Honorable Speaker, sir, honorable members of the Committee on Appointments, my name is Dorcas Agik Odong Oduor. I'm privileged to appear before you today for the purpose of being vetted for the position of Attorney General of this great Republic of Kenya. This is as required under Article 156, Sub-Article 2 of the Constitution of Kenya. Honorable Speaker, sir, and honorable members, I'm deeply, deeply humbled by the confidence and trust which His Excellency the President, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, has shown and placed in me by nominating me to this position. It is also not lost on me that this is a historic moment, in that this will be the first time for a Kenyan woman to be interviewed for this high office in the legal sector. I'm therefore under no illusion that should I be approved by this August House, much would be expected of me, both as a jurist and more significantly as a woman. Mr. Speaker, and honorable members, it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge the fact that, in essence, I do not stand here alone. I stand on the shoulders of many people of goodwill, and I'm a beneficiary of their generous support and mentorship. Their knowledge and wisdom over the years has shaped me into the person I am today. Honorable Speaker and members, for my secondary school education, I attended Luak Girls High School, after which I read law at the University of Nairobi. Thereafter, I gained a postgraduate diploma from the Kenya School of Law. I subsequently attained a Master's of Arts degree at my alma mater, the University of Nairobi. I have also other certificates and commendations from other relevant professional, leadership, management, and other training institutions over the years. Mr. Speaker, sir, and honorable members of this committee, all this I have set in the CV that I have submitted to you. Honorable Speaker, sir, and members, my legal career started in 1992 when I was admitted to the role of Advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I was then employed and served in the State Law Office, rising from the position of State Counsel to the position of Secretary Public Prosecutions, and that was in 2017. This was as a result of the delinking of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions from the Office of the Attorney General by the Constitution of Kenya 2010. I have gained extensive experience and expertise throughout that period. Not only have I been involved in many complex courtroom and high-profile cases, I've also made significant contributions in the formulation of policy and other protocols relevant to the rule of law, human rights, crime prevention, locally, regionally, and internationally. This included service in various task forces, commissions of inquiry, and similar bodies and committees. I've outlined this in the dossier I have provided to this honorable committee. Mr. Speaker, sir, and honorable members, I'm alive to the enormity of the responsibility reposed in the office of the Attorney General of the Republic by the Constitution of Kenya. It is no mean task that the Attorney General is the principal legal advisor to the government. The Constitution also mandates the office to promote, protect, and uphold the rule of law and to defend the public interest. While these high legal concepts are still evolving through the growing jurisprudence in our courts and elsewhere, they nonetheless require of this office a vibrant awareness of the human rights ecosystem within the legal framework. It is therefore my respectful opinion, Honorable Speaker and members, that the position of the Attorney General calls for far much more than just that of an advocate for one client. The public interest demands of the office the duty to respect, advocate, and operationalize at all cadres of the administration this cardinal value of justice. In the circumstances, Mr. Speaker, sir, and honorable members, I would submit that we stand at a unique moment in our constitutional dispensation. It calls for the qualities of listening and learning. Should this House confirm me, I would be determined as a matter of priority to pay attention to those two qualities. Not having occupied the position of the Attorney General before, I would obviously benefit from the strengths and victories of my predecessors. I would also seek to collaborate with other persons and agencies to enhance any aspect of the vision and mission of this office, which may still require revitalization. My bounden duty would have to be the delivery of sound, honest, and objective legal advice to the government in accordance with the Constitution of Kenya and my oath of office. Additionally, it would demand proactiveness in the attainment of other core responsibilities in the public interest. All stakeholders in the justice sector have no less duty than that. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, sir, and members, for me, working together will not be an option, but an imperative. Mr. Speaker, sir, and honorable members of this committee, in my years of schooling and work, one signal lesson has been imprinted into my intellect and conscience. It is simply this: to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with my God. That is recorded in the book of Micah 6:8 by Prophet Micah. That is a statement to the fact that I should never take my abilities or capacity for granted, nor should I think low of others. Ultimately, my strength and eventual success may well depend on the counsel and industry of those around me. Honorable Speaker, sir, and members, for that reason, in my respectful view, teamwork will always be key, and I would propose to enhance the same. To that end, Mr. Speaker, sir, and honorable members, I dutifully submit myself to you to this interview. Thank you.
Thank you, nominee. I'll now invite the Deputy Speaker to be the first to ask you a question or comment. And when questions are asked, be concise and precise in your answers.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The nominee, Dorcas Agik Oduor, all of us in the legal fraternity know that you have previously worked at the State Law Office and the Prosecution Department. I think mostly people know you as that, as per your CV also. And when the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution was delinked from the Office of the Attorney General. In 2010, you transitioned to the Office of the DPP, where you were serving as the second most senior person as Secretary, Public Prosecution. Could you share with this committee what you consider was your greatest achievements in the 30 years in your public service? And secondly, if approved as Attorney General, like you rightfully said, you will make history as the first woman Attorney General. Like myself, all the women in the legal fraternity have high expectations of you as one of the most senior women in the legal fraternity. In this regard, tell us what you'd consider to be your vision of the office of the Attorney General should you be approved. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I joined the office of the Attorney General in 1992, and I would divide my achievements from the office of the Attorney General and the office of the DPP into 4 sectors. When I joined in 1992, for the first 8 years, I was a courtroom lawyer. I prosecuted all manner of cases in all courts to the highest court. The epitome of that was in 2000, when I was nominated to go and assist Kenya in prosecuting the 1998 bomb blast victims, a case in New York. And we successfully did that. Another epitome of my court work was the case that I prosecuted against. It is known as the Gachanja case. The reason why it is my achievement, it is the first time that a prosecutor was able to forfeit instruments of crime and proceeds of crime. In that matter, one of the accused persons had been paid by a piece of land in order to commit murder, and I successfully forfeited what he was paid. That matter went up to the Supreme Court, and it was upheld. My third success in court would be the case of Chris Okemo on extradition. There was a conflict between the Office of the Attorney General and the Office of the DPP as to whose responsibility it is to sign authority to proceed. I did prosecute that case, litigated it, because it was a civil case now. It was a constitutional petition. I did litigate it in the High Court and the Court of Appeal. I filed responses in the Supreme Court. My colleague prosecuted it at the Supreme Court, and we were successful. That matter is now settled, that it is the responsibility of the Director of Public Prosecutions to sign the authority to proceed. That is in the courtroom, among others. While serving in the office of the AG and the DPP, I was able to participate, humbly so. I was appointed by different heads of state in this country to serve in commissions and task forces. I served in the Akiwimi Commission on land clashes, and it is after we had submitted our report that we started land reforms in this country. I served in the Goldenberg Commission, and it is after we submitted our report that we relooked at our PFM Act. I served in the Police Task Force on police reforms, and it is the result of that task force that we now have IPOA, we have the Police Service Commission, we have the IG as a single command of the police and the AP. We also have the merger of the Kenya Police and APs under single command. Other than task forces within the country, I have contributed internationally in different forums. My first contribution was with the Commonwealth Secretariat. I was called in as an expert to review the Harare scheme on mutual legal assistance. It is after my contribution to the ComSec and successful review of that mutual legal assistance scheme that I came back and proposed to Kenya that we needed a Mutual Legal Assistance Act. The Kenya government agreed, and we came up with an act, and that is the act we are dealing with today, the Mutual Legal Assistance Act. Secondly, I have done a lot of work with the FATF. FATF is Financial Action Task Force. It is a group of G7 and other countries. They set standards on issues of money laundering and asset forfeiture. I am a trained evaluator. I've evaluated 2 countries, one in Africa and one in Europe on compliance with the 40 recommendations. It is after my contribution to that forum that I came back to Kenya together with my colleagues, and we assisted in legislation of POCAMLA, which is Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering. It is also after that that we assisted with the legislation of Terrorism Finance Acts. A product of that is the FIU, the Financial Reporting Unit, the Asset Recovery Agency, and the National Task Force. I've also done some work with the UN. And at the UN, I assisted Kenya when we were negotiating the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. I also took part in the evaluation of that convention. I was again called in as an expert to make a digest, which I provided. And in that digest, I am an expert in piracy. After that, the United Nations accredited me as a trainer in that space. I've also done some work with AGA Africa. AGA Africa is a conglomeration of attorney generals. As the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, we collaborated with them, and we have all the Black attorney generals in the USA in that forum. They have assisted the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions in many areas, and they have exposed and assisted the DPP to operationalize the PTI. Other than those, I have done work with GIZ with regard to illicit financial flows. Incidentally, when I heard of my nomination, I was representing Kenya at the UN headquarters to take part in the final negotiation of the amendments of the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime to include issues of electronic evidence and data protection. That was the last call for countries to give their views before the amendments are adopted. And I am hoping that after this initiative, Kenya will accede to the Budapest Convention to bridge the gap we have in electronic evidence and data protection. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, sir, to go back to the Office of the Attorney General and the Office of the DPP. I have served in that office in different capacities. I have acted as the DPP in during 3 transitions, but now I am the Secretary of Public Prosecutions. When we delinked from the Office of the Attorney General, we had only 98 prosecution counsel, and we were in 12 regional offices. It was then my responsibility, together with the DPP, to rationalize staff and to operationalize the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. We have managed to increase the staff of the Office of the DPP from 98 to 1,600. We have managed to decentralize the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions from 12 offices to all the 47 counties, to 131 court stations, and we also serve mobile courts. We have also managed, during that period, to civilize prosecution. What do I mean by this? Initially, police prosecutors were prosecuting in all courts. When we took over, we professionalized prosecution. We no longer have police prosecutors in our courtrooms. This is being done by prosecution counsel. Other than that, when Mr. Haji took over the helm of the Director of Public Prosecutions, he found, when we had an initiative where we were looking at the position or the contribution of the criminal justice sector to the development of this country, and how the Department of Public Prosecutions, or the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, was assisting or impeding the realization of the objectives of this country. I therefore, together with others, started an initiative called All for Justice. and All for Justice, we wanted to look at the role the prosecution is playing in realizing the objectives of the criminal justice sector. We visited almost all the prisons in Kenya. We interviewed about 20,000 prisoners. And Honorable Speaker and members, I really wonder what led us to do this, because looking back, I realized that somebody was directing my steps. Because the conclusion of that report, which I have here today, indicated that what the prosecution wanted to do could not be done by the prosecution, but could only be done by the Attorney General. And I want to run over 4 of them. When we went through the 20,000 inmates, pretrial inmates, and we checked all the prisons in Kenya, it was a wonder that although under the Constitution we talk about innocent unless proven guilty, it was clear that our criminal justice system is inconsistent with the right of innocence until proven guilty. Why do I say that? We found that most of the people who were in custody for petty offenses. There was nothing we could do because the law provided for them. Then we realized that there is a need for us to relook at our offenses in Kenya so that we can decriminalize petty offenses. At the same time, there is a need for us to find a different way of dealing with petty offenses. So we made that recommendation to the Office of the Attorney General. We also found that most of the people who were in custody were young people and they were poor. There was no mechanism that these people could be assisted. Each time they went to court, they needed bail, and bail is in cash. So we asked ourselves, is cash the only way that we can secure the attendance of accused persons to court? We made the recommendation to the NCAJ, and we're waiting for the Attorney General to attend to it. Thirdly, we also found that most of the people who were in custody were not represented. There was no equality of arms. They could not defend themselves. We made a recommendation to the Attorney General that there was a need to operationalize the legal aid services. Because when people are not represented, they are not able to move through the system. And honorable members and Mr. Speaker, sir, I would invite you people to visit our pretrial detentions. We talk about rights. We talk about the rights of the arrested, the rights of the accused persons, the rights of the detained person, but we have not made it tangible. Because if you visit these institutions, you will wonder what we are as Kenya. None of the people charged with corruption cases was in pretrial detention. It is only the poor. They have no food, they have no classes, cases take very long, and most people who should be in custody are working outside. And most people who should be outside are in custody. There is a need for us to reform the criminal justice sector. We also observed that cases were taking very long, and there was a need for us to expedite those cases through the system. As a result of that, DPP Haji, myself and the office tried to come up with initiatives within our power. And that is why we came up with the decision to charge guidelines. And that is one of my biggest achievements, our biggest achievement. The decision to charge guidelines is supposed to regulate how we make the decision to charge, so that we sieve the system, petty cases do not go to court. We also came up with the diversion guidelines, and the diversion guidelines is supposed to attend to alternatives to prosecutions, because we realize that not everybody who is charged with an offense should go through the system. And that was said by Sir Shawcross, the Attorney General of England in 1950, that not in all cases where you have evidence, people should go through court. So we came up with a diversion guideline to assist us to sieve the cases. What is the challenge that the DPP could not deal with that the Attorney General should deal with? A prosecutor could decide to divert, but where are the structures to divert to? Because if I have young people who have been brought to me and I realize that they can be rehabilitated, I need a rehabilitation center. I need counseling services. How many of our counties have rehabilitation centers and have counseling facilities? Therefore, our action is in futility. Prosecutors are being accused of taking many cases to court. It is because we have initiatives, but we need other structures of government to assist us to realize those initiatives.
Could wind up on that.
Yes. And we also found that most of our prosecutors had no capacity, and therefore maybe were making wrong decisions. And that is the reason why, in order to harness and structure the training of prosecutors, we came up with the Prosecution Training Institute. At the Prosecution Training Institute, we now have a fully fledged course where prosecutors can undertake contiguous legal training, specialized training, and also training on emerging crimes. We hope that the Prosecution Training Institute will be a center for the region and will bring A&A to this country. On access to justice, we found that prosecutors were having a difficulty in attending court. We therefore digitized. We have Wadilifu. Most processes within the office of the DPP are digitized. In order to enhance access to justice, we, together with the EU, got a bot to help us to attend to courts that are outside the normal courts, that is in Lamu. And it is also pursuant to that initiative that we came up with community initiatives where we would go to the community and have community dialogues so that we can tell them about their rights and the criminal justice sector. And it is also pursuant to that we did another research on traffic to find why it is impacting the criminal justice sector. We find that it is clogging the criminal justice sector. Most of the crimes that we arrest people for are non-moving and they are petty, like not wearing a uniform and touting. And it is for that reason that the Director of Public Prosecutions directed that touting should not be charged so that we don't clog the system. I have put all that before you.
Yes.
And at an appropriate time, if I'm nominated, I intend to
You've
use...
been nominated. If you are found
If
suitable.
I am found suitable, Honorable Speaker, sir, and members,
Yes.
this experience will help me to oversee and to steer the Office of the Attorney General. Thank you.
Ichungwa, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, allow me to also say I know the nominee. I have worked with her when I was the Vice Chair of the Public Investments Committee when she was in the Attorney General Chambers. And Honorable Speaker, maybe to start with, her name Agik, I'm told, means I have arrived. Is that so?
That is correct, sir.
So, having started your career at the Attorney General's Chambers as a State Counsel, probably you have arrived as AG nominee. But we just changed the law for the Attorney General Act, I think about 3 or 4 months ago. And we now gave the AG power to recruit you and appoint your own state counsel. Unlike before where you had to go through the Public Service Commission. One, I would like to hear your view on whether that was a good thing to do, or if you feel probably those powers should have been left because there was a tussle between the Office of the AG and the Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commission insisting that they should continue appointing or rather recruiting staff and across the entire public service. I would just want to hear your view on that, whether it is good to have those powers in the AG or whether that should be reviewed to take the powers back for recruitment back to the Public Service Commission. 2, I'd want to hear if, since this is a law now, and government has lost quite a number of cases, largely on account of the caliber of staff that are there in the Attorney General's chambers in terms of the State Council. Many do not turn up in court, and many cases are lost in court. That has occasioned government losing many cases in court, and some that are very costly to taxpayers. I think if you were to accumulate the total number of judgments against government in terms of quantum of amounts that ought to be paid by government, they would run into the trillions. I would want to hear what is it that you intend to do should you be approved. One, to make sure that you are able to recruit and retain good state counsel, because the Attorney General Chambers also has become a training ground for counsel. They come there, train for a few years, and they are poached by parliament, they are poached by ministries and other organizations. What will you do to retain good state counsel so that government doesn't continue losing cases in court?
Go ahead, answer those two.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, sir, and members. With regard to delinking, I am the wrong person to ask because I fully support this. And this is what has helped the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. When we were delinked from the Office of the Attorney General, the ODPP Act, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions Act, which operationalized Article 157 of the Constitution, provided for a board, which is chaired by the DPP. And the mandate of this board is to advise the DPP on recruitment discipline of counsel. Why this is a good idea? It gave us the opportunity of relooking at our establishment so that we could get the necessary skills and the requisite officers to propel the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. I am the secretary to that board, and I know what we have achieved. We have increased our establishment. We have been able to rationalize our staff. We have been able to negotiate for our staff. As we speak today, it is the Office of the DPP that negotiated with SRC to allow lawyers in government to earn what we call in the ODPP prosecution allowance, and in the Office of the Attorney General, it's called another allowance, which is different from non-practicing allowance. And this is to help retain officers. At the same time, it is within that board, which I serve as a secretary, that we were able to find ways of complying with the Constitution. We therefore rationalize staff. If you go to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions today, we have 60% women, 40% men. It is the face of Kenya. We have tried to recruit from every part of this country. Secondly, the board has also helped us with issues of discipline because they go quickly and we are able to conclude them within time. Third, the board has assisted because the DPP is required on any other matter to consult the board. So necessarily when it warrants, we go back to the board to get counsel on issues of human resource. And it is through that we have relooked at our human resource manuals. We have looked at our transfer policy. We have also relooked at our work environment. And the beauty of the board is that the PS Treasury is represented. That is at the ODPP's office. The PS Treasury is represented. The Attorney General is represented. The Judiciary is represented. The Kenya Police is represented. The Law Society is represented. So there is collegiality. And we're able to share our expertise and experience on how we can work together as a chain. The second question was a comment on government losing cases and what I would do. Mr. Speaker, sir, and members, there are reasons why people lose cases, not only the government. All of us lose cases one time or another for maybe these three reasons. One, it could be that you have a bad case. You will lose it. It could be that you have bad representation or inadequate representation. You could do that. You could also lose a case because the court has erred. In which case, if you feel aggrieved, you will go back to court, either for appeal or revision. You could also lose a case for any other reason. Any other reason? None of the above. So what I would do, if I'm losing a case because I have a bad case, it would be my responsibility as the Attorney General to make sure that before we go to court, I relook at the cases that we have. I try to mitigate the risk of going to court. And if possible, if I have a bad case, try to find other mechanisms of resolving the issue without going to court and incurring expenses to the government. And going forward, I would also say that it will be the responsibility of the Attorney General to advise ministries and MDAs on how they should deal with court matters, such that the Attorney General is involved from the beginning. That is if I have a bad case. If I have inadequate or insufficient representation, I'll look at my capacity and the expertise that I have within the Office of the Attorney General. And this is exactly what we did in the Office of the DPP, because initially we had private counsel assisting us, but with the time, we relooked at the capacities that we have. We have to enhance the capacity of our state counsel, not only legally, but also their working environment and their terms and conditions of service. And we would also want to make sure that there is continuity and succession within the Office of the Attorney General. If I lose a case because the court has erred, I will go back to court on appeal on those issues. I may also go back to court on revision on issues that I think warrant revision. So going forward, if I am confirmed to this position, I will make sure that if I have a bad case, I look for mitigating factors, I do a risk assessment so that I protect the government. If I have insufficient or inadequate representation, I will make sure that wherever the government is to be defended in court, we have the correct people defending the government, we put our foot forward, and we act in the interest of justice. If I lose a case for any other reason, I have to go to the JSC. Thank you.
Jeanette?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Madam Nominee, in this vetting, we are looking at your suitability for the job and your competence for the job. Now, I want to ask you this question. One, you have attempted multiple times to become a judge in the Court of Appeal, or once maybe, and despite your impeccable academic credentials and illustrious legal career, you have been bypassed each time. Did JSC provide you with answers as to why they did that? Or was it your last name? What could be the problem? Can you explain to us as a committee what could be the problem? My second question is, it's on record. This country went through post-election violence in 2007, 2008. And you're on record, you say that much later, that there is no evidence to charge certain people who were involved in that post-election violence. What else made you make that decision? Can you explain to the committee why you took that decision as a serious prosecutor, a distinguished prosecutor who's known for prosecuting people? Why did you take that decision? And my last one is, there are bills that have passed through this House that have been declared unconstitutional by the court. And some of these bills emanated from the executive with the participation of the Office of the Attorney General. What will you do to improve the quality of legislation coming from the executive now that if you are approved, you will become the Attorney General, so that the issues of courts declaring laws enacted by Parliament as a constitution becomes a thing of the past? I have those three questions as of now. Thank you.
Dorcas, answer them quickly.
Thank you, sir. About the JSC, I think the positions were few. I'm not the only one who succeeded, but I believe that it was not my time, and my time was going to.
Do they give reasons when they don't give you the job? They don't?
They don't, sir.
Okay.
They don't. About post-election violence, and me having said that there was no reason to prosecute, I want to say that I chaired a task force 3 years down the line to look at offenses that were committed subsequent to the post-election violence. The task force concluded a report that was presented to His Excellency the President of government is concerned. I chaired as a prosecutor also, which requires me to be sure that before I can recommend prosecution, I have sufficient evidence and it is in the public interest and I have a reasonable prospect of conviction. I used the law as it was and I applied it to the circumstances and I did my contribution to the task force, and whatever was presented to His Excellency the President was the result of the conclusion of the task force. That task force included civil society. Thank you. About bills going to Parliament and the government losing or courts declaring bills or legislation unconstitutional. First and foremost, it is the work of the courts to do that. That is one of the duties that they've been given. And if they do it, they're not doing a wrong thing. We should ask ourselves, why then the notoriety? I believe that most legislations that we have come up with of late have been to comply or to operationalize the 2010 constitutions. Most of the contents of those bills contain new jurisprudence, not only to the executive, but even to the judiciary. I take it as a testing time. We are testing the Constitution through bills, through legislation. Honorable Speaker and honorable members, a testament to this is that even in the Court of Appeal, there are issues that they've not agreed on. They have not given direction. It is a good thing for us to test a new legislation. It will be volatile for some time, but after some times when we have matured with the 2010 Constitution, then the law will be settled. But that having been said, it is a concern if bills are declared unconstitutional when the Honorable Attorney General has contributed to them. What I would do is to find out why they have been declared unconstitutional. Number two, I would make sure that as the Attorney General, I advise that wherever we come up with a bill, it meets the constitutional requirements as provided. Thank you.
Now, Dorcas nominee will take a batch of 333, starting with Isola, Posing, then on Gikaria, in that order.
All right, thank you.
One question each, no preambles.
Okay, please allow me to ask two. Chairman, no preamble. You have served in the AG's office before. Are there instances where the AG then advised the executive and the advice was not taken? What will you do if this committee finds you suitable in the National Assembly and you advise the executive on different matters and your advice is not taken? The second question is that there are areas or there are circumstances where cases have been lost in court, as you have said, but then the judiciary then orders compensation to the litigants. My question is, why should taxpayers carry the burden of the compensation while there is an officer in the executive whose decisions have occasioned the judiciary asking that that money should be compensated? And we have many litigants who've never been compensated that the judiciary asked that they get compensated. And lastly, the 2/3 gender rule. How will you make sure it is realized? We cannot selectively follow the Constitution on the matters that suit us, but on matters 2/3 we don't. I will not speak again later. So there's someone who has asked a question from the public that in Kenya today, the holder of a law degree is not eligible for admission to the role of advocates unless they attend the advocates training program and pass their bar exams. Currently, ATP is only offered at the Kenya School of Law. And so there have been attempts to review the law that mandates this. And so there's, and the attempts have been received with different divergent legal view. What is your position on this?
Thank you, Chairman. Mine to the nominee, the Office of Attorney General, is practical one, which is, nominee, I want to know, or the people of Kenya, in assessing your suitability, we want to know what is your opinion or vision on these contracts or clauses in contracts that a government entity enters with international companies. And in those clauses, the clauses inside those contracts, and I've seen it from being chairman PIC, where Kenya lose money, they put a clause to say that if there's a conflict in that contract, that the arbitration or the legal resolution will be done, for example, in London. And yet, Madam Nominee, through the chairman, the money is paid is 100% exchequer, which means it's our money. And our case in point is GDC, where Kenya lost hundreds of millions of money in London through something I call kangaroo court called arbitration, where people can agree to fleece people's money and agree.
Arbitrations are legitimate courts within both our system and the international systems. They cannot be called kangaroo courts. That's not a fair comment.
I thank you, Honorable Speaker, but that's my opinion. Maybe it's different from the legal practice, but I found it a kangaroo court, Honorable Speaker, that just people sit down and agree. And Kenyans, Madam Nominee, through my speaker, has lost a lot of money through that process. So what's your opinion? Can we change the law and have a contract, particularly where Kenyan money, which is exchequer, maybe if it's a loan, that's a different way. What is your opinion on that, Madam Nominee, so that Kenyans don't lose money as we lost through GDC? I thank you, Speaker, in that kangaroo court.
Not being a lawyer yourself, we forgive you. Go on, Gikaria.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I have this question.
Yes, Junet.
Speaker, I thought Honorable Koseng is a lawyer. I saw him that time when we had the cases in Hague. I saw him carrying a lot of documents and saying that he's filing cases in Hague. And
that is exactly what he was doing, carrying documents. That doesn't make you a lawyer. Go on, Docas.
Point about the Speaker.
Go on, sorry, Gikaria.
Chair, there is this review of call for us to review the Constitution, either be it through the parliamentary initiative or the popular initiative, like not having even the opposition leader in parliament and things like that. And also, like what happened just there recently on a constitutional issue under Article 37 and the Public Order Act. Maybe, what, in your view, are the sections that we need to look for in terms of the constitutional amendment, particularly to be able to align between Article 37 and the Public Order Act, where you have to balance the two for us to realize. So maybe in your view, which areas do we need to look for the amendment in the Constitution? Thank you.
Yes, Nominee, can you deal?
Chairman, and my colleagues, my apologies. It has something to do with what I had asked. I just want to know the past costly AG advices to government, mainly driven by vested in-house manipulative cartels, especially in Treasury, and official systems operatives in huge government development projects. I'd like to know your view on that.
You can respond to those three honorable members.
Thank you,
Naisula
Honorable Speaker,
Posing,
sir.
but also don't call arbitrations kangaroo because they are not.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, sir, and members of this committee. I am not privy to any advice of an Attorney General under whom I served that was not taken by the executive. As to what I would do if my advice is not taken, I take it that the Constitution provides that the Attorney General is the principal legal advisor to government in legal matters. I look at the President as a vision bearer of the whole country. As he receives advice from the Office of the Attorney General, he has to take into account other sectors because the law does not exist in a vacuum. He has to take into account socioeconomic matters, security matters, and I believe he not only gets advice from the Attorney General, but also from those other sectors. It is the culmination of all these advices from different sectors in which I have no expertise to give that the President of the Republic of Kenya would make a decision. If the President of the Republic of Kenya is the vision bearer and everybody under him is working towards achieving the vision of the government of the day, I do not see where there can be a conflict. Otherwise, for me, I would give efficient, professional advice, which is just, which is fair, which is objective, which is truthful, and which is in accordance with the Constitution. The lost cases in the judiciary, I think it is important for me to say that I am not able to comment on why specific cases are lost unless I am seized with the information. But I also think that it is the responsibility of the Attorney General to put in place mechanisms to mitigate loss. And where loss is occasioned deliberately by an officer, to take action or to recommend action. The 2/3 gender rule. The Constitution provides that in all appointive and elective posts, one gender should not be more than 1/3, 2/3. I think this is an issue that has been litigated. This is an issue that is before this House. And I would be cautious in commenting on it unless I see what is before Parliament and what is in the Office of the Attorney General and the initiative. But I know that in the Office of the Attorney General, in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, we have reached the threshold. Legal education and CLE. This is a rowdy place, very, very rowdy, very rowdy. And I say that because I live with some of those people. I have seen them. I empathize and sympathize with them. I understand that there are two task forces that are given reports to the Attorney General. Those reports are in the Office of the Attorney General. And pursuant to those reports, there are two bills pending before Parliament to harmonize legal education, to set standards, accreditation. Because, Mr. Speaker, sir, I am told that in some instances, you go to an accredited university, but when you go to the School of Law, you are not allowed or you are not admitted. I know these people are frustrated, and that is my priority, to go and look at these two reports, to look at what is pending in Parliament, and to make sure that we recall it back, because this was 3-4 years ago. There could be some intervening factors to make sure that we are responsive, because these people need a closure and they need to know. They legitimately expected that after learning law, they would be admitted. So I do agree, this is a very rowdy area. It is frustrating and it calls for priority, and it will be one of my priorities if I'm accorded an opportunity to serve. At the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, having found that this was a problem, we created a cadre called legal interns. We tried to bring in people who had gone through the School of Law, but for one reason or another could not be admitted. because they were frustrated. In fact, we started by getting in 100 and we distributed them. But apparently that was not in accordance with what Treasury expected, so we had no money, so we stopped it. I also think that it is the responsibility of the Attorney General to relook at pupillage so that we can structure some pupillage mechanism within the executive so that we can absorb some of these children. It is an area that, as an Attorney General, as an advocate, and having been the Secretary of Public Prosecutions, I admit it is an area that needs urgent call. Thank you. I was asked about the vision, the vision of the office. Mr. Speaker, and honorable members, under the Constitution of Kenya, the Attorney General is the principal advisor to the government, also represents the government in courts. At the same time, the Attorney General is supposed to act in public interest. It occurs to me that the Attorney General is wearing two hats. He is a lawyer, he is also a minister. But this public-facing, public interest part has not been very clear. Therefore, I vision to be an Attorney General who will actualize the vision of an Attorney General under the Constitution. Be a principal legal advisor to the government, represent the government efficiently and adequately, and at the same time, protect public interest, uphold rule of law, protect human rights, good governance and accountability. I will be a responsive Attorney General and a lawyer of the people. And I hope the Office of the Attorney General will work with all the peoples of Kenya in realizing our aspirations under the Constitution. When it comes to contracts which are eschewed, Honorable Speaker, sir, I don't have any information on this, but if confirmed, I would make sure that we come up with some SOPs, standard operating procedures. We set standards, and we make sure that the Attorney General is actually represented and reliably represented in the contracts from the beginning to the end. Because unless you look at the quality of the contract and you mitigate any loss or any risk, it is very difficult to succeed in the end. So there is a need for an Attorney General to be represented from the beginning, to look at the clauses to make sure that they're responsive to what we need and that they protect us. At the same time, should we feel that some of the clauses will be injurious to us, we could review. That calls for expertise and very professional state counsel. The third question was on constitutional review. Mr. Speaker, sir, and members, the Constitution is a live document. And within the Constitution itself, there are provisions for review, which means that there is room to review and amend the Constitution. However, the rule of law requires that all laws of Kenya are made by the participation or with the participation. Be clear, they must be available, and they must be able to be legislated. For that reason, it is only the people of Kenya who can say what they want to change in a constitution, because they have to be part and parcel of the law. The office of the Attorney General can just be facilitative. Having had our constitution for the last 15 years, I would agree with those who are saying we are now ripe to relook at the constitution to see what is working or not working. And this was provided for in the Constitution and under the rule of law attributes. A law that is not working should be reviewed, should be amended so that it is responsive, so that it can speak to the times that we live in. So I will facilitate such. Yes. Thank you.
Now we'll take another batch of 3. Let's start with Robert Mbui, Owen Baya, Murugara. Dawood, hold your horses.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. To the nominee, having worked in the office of the DPP, and noting that after we did our vetting in 2022, some of the nominees who had criminal cases against them, immediately after they were appointed, those cases were dropped. Now, as a legal advisor to the executive, if approved, one of the newly appointed CSs, one for cooperative, the Honorable Wycliffe Mbetsa Oparanya, he confirmed on oath while he was here that the EACC has been used as a political tool to frustrate him when he was not in government. Now, I have two issues that I want you to maybe make a comment on. First and foremost, why should EACC be asked to give an opinion when it doesn't matter? Because the opinion given by EACC did not matter in the vetting process, yet we have to fill those documents even when you apply for public office like a member of parliament. Two, what will you do about the government's, what advice will you give, legal advice will you give to the government security organs and legal entities or legal teams, EACC, DCI, DPP, on politicizing and weaponizing their offices? And finally, how will you ensure that justice is served to all those parents and people who lost their lives, who are injured and who lost valuable assets during the recent demonstrations? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. This nominee, I've only seen her on TV and newspapers. Now I have opportunity to interact with her. Yeah. But I just want to ask this question, Honorable Speaker. Drafting is very key, especially on laws. And that's probably the link between executive and parliament is how those laws come in, having passed through the AG's office. I have looked at your CV and I've listened to you. You're a very good litigant or prosecuting lawyer. But I haven't seen your strength in drafting of laws, which is probably one of the key areas that we will need to have in that office to avoid this idea of losing cases as government and passing bad laws. I haven't seen that as strength on your CV. So how will you really help this country moving forward in terms of good laws and good legislation? Secondly, a lot of these laws that have gone to court have fallen on the sword of public participation, which is a key tenet in the Constitution. And everything that we do right now, and every person who goes to court and says there was no public participation, even when public participation has been seen to be done, judges rule in favor of those litigants. What is public participation? What is the correct public participation to you? Or what are you going to do to protect Parliament and this government from that? And lastly, if you allow me, Honorable Speaker, if you look at Section 43 of the County Government Act, it is very clear that the Attorney General may assist counties in matters apart from criminal cases. That is what Section 43 of the County Government Act says. And actually, it goes back to Article 156(4) of the Constitution. But county governments have been using colossal sums of money to hire lawyers without regard to the fact that the Attorney General's job to actually defend county governments. How are we going to stop this hemorrhage of money from county governments through payment to lawyers? I know the lawyers are listening to me and may not be very happy about this, but it is a tenant in the it is.
There's one next to you.
It is that monumental amounts. You look at Nairobi County government; they are running billions in terms of legal fees, and yet it is the duty of the Office of the Attorney General to assist counties in legal matters. How are you going to, do you think we need an instrument of law so that we can define the role of the Attorney General in counties? Counties are now setting up things called county attorneys, and they are basically lawyers in there at the county attorney's office, but they don't even go to court. they pay these lawyers, but then they pay external lawyers huge fees. How are you going to stop this? Because I think it is corruption. How are you going to stop it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Nominee, the office you're just about to take over is a pale shadow of what it used to be. And if we draw parallels, when it used to be held by Sir Charles Njonjo, the first black man to be the AG, and what you're taking over as the first lady, if you're approved by this house. Almost everything is lost. And recently, we had as parliament to try and salvage your position by returning the power to recruit staff back to you. And in fact, the same time also, the AG was going to lose the only asset that was left under his armpit, which was the public seal. That tells you how eroded the office is. As the incoming AG, if you are approved, what areas do you think should be recovered and returned to the office so that it is given the dignity that it used to have, which dignity possibly is now lost? Secondly, unsatisfied judgments are a nightmare in this country. If I'm not wrong, I think you owe Kenyans, or the government owes Kenyans, to the tune of about 1.6 trillion in unsatisfied judgments. What are you going to do about this? Or would you agree with me that we should be amending the Government Proceedings Act and open up government property to attachment by auctioneers to satisfy judgments that are unpaid? And lastly, the CLE, the Council for Legal Education, which I think is as old as legal practice in the country, which is started with those practices of articled clerks at the Kenya School of Law of the same time. Do you think there is any necessity of having CLE and Kenya School of Law at the same time? Or should we now merge these two so that once you go to Kenya School of Law, you come out as an advocate, even if there are regulations formulated by CLE, but this idea of exams are by CLE, education or teaching is by KSL, is misnomer as far as we are concerned. What will be your position as regards those two dockets? And finally, as the AG, will you be prepared, and can you tell Kenyans that you will actually stand up personally as a seasoned lawyer, litigator of many years standing to defend our government in courts? Because the reason why we have lost most of these cases, to be frank, is because you do not have experienced advocates there. Number two, those you sent are junior and possibly are missed meat to seasoned lawyers out there who sue the government. Will you stand up and defend that government personally?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, sir, and honorable members. I was asked why the EACC should give an opinion. Honorable Speaker, sir, and members, I think this issue of vetting is also murky, because even at the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, we get requests to clear people from different agencies. And we have been wondering on what capacity we would do that. So wouldn't want to comment on why the EACC is giving an opinion, but I would want to say that the whole procedure of vetting needs to be relooked at so that what we do is impactful and informs decision-making. What I would do if cases are being weaponized and politicized, as far as I'm concerned, public officers act in good faith, are required to follow the Constitution, to act in the public interest and the interest of administration of justice. Whoever does the opposite is not a public officer, is a criminal. I was told that drafting is very key. And I have not drafted any. When I was introducing myself, I articulated the legislations that I have personally led and have gone through this parliament and have never been declared unconstitutional. One, the Mutual Legal Assistance Act, the Anti-Corruption Legislations, the Organized Crimes Act, the Transfer of Prisoners Act, Cybercrime Legislation, the ODPP Act, the Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act, and several policies and procedures. And I can assure you that none of them has been declared unconstitutional. What is public participation? Public participation should be meaningful and impactful. As to what public participation should be is also a dicey area. And I think this is one area where we are testing our constitution. We have not come up with parameters of what is public participation. I think there is a need for a policy to give guideline or regulation on what public participation is. It might require a policy and then legislation, because I think Kenyans must be given an opportunity themselves to say what they want to see in terms of public participation. But it is an area that needs urgent consideration. And as we have agreed that our constitution is ripe for review, because it is provided for under the constitution, maybe this is one of those areas that will go back to Kenyans to relook at. Thank you. The image of the Office of the Attorney General. Oh.
Pardon?
The
question on the county.
Yes. The question on county government.
And the legal fees.
Mr. Speaker, sir, and honorable members, the impact of county governments is one of the areas that the interplay between the national government and the county governments is a bit cloudy. And should we have an opportunity to relook at our constitution, I think that is one area where we should put effort to see whether the objects of devolution are being achieved. From the perspective of the Director of Public Prosecutions, we also had that problem where county attorneys were representing people or coming up with criminal laws without the participation of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. So I think when we download the functions that are given to the county governments and the national government, there is need to give guideline on where the boundary is, how far they can go. Because if we don't act together, there's no unity of purpose, we act in cross purposes, then the person who is benefiting is the person who is the enemy of our country. So I think that is one area that we need to relook at. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, my question, last one was not answered.
Which one?
Which is?
I just wanted, as a legal advisor of the executive, and we talked about, I just mentioned the issue of the recent demos and the people that were injured, killed. His Excellency, the President himself talked about compensation. I wanted to get your comment on that and what advice you would give, because the government would be the one that stands accused.
My apologies.
Go ahead.
Honorable Speaker, sir, and members, as the custodian of people's rights, the Attorney General is also expected to uphold the rights of the people who have been injured and complainants and victims. I am aware that there is a Victims Compensation Act that has been legislated by this August House. There is an initiative to operationalize the Victim Compensation Board, which is under the Office of the Attorney General. As a prosecutor, compensation of victims is a very important tool in the fight against corruption, because many instances we have complainants who lose things. Either they are taken by accused persons or they are injured by people in government, but they don't get compensated. To buttress the gaps that I was talking about in the criminal justice system, I think the Victim Compensation Act and the Victim Compensation Board, I'm sorry if I don't get the names right, that fall under the Office of the Attorney General should be operationalized so that we give the parameters and the standards of compensation of victims. And that will also be a priority.
Murugara's questions? Many short ones. So you can run through them quickly.
Yes. The image of the Office of the Attorney General. It is my vision that if I'm confirmed, I would strive to make sure that the Office of the Attorney General is that office that is described under the Constitution, that it is the people's lawyer. Whether or not I will meet that standard will depend on my actions. I have been given the tools, I have been given the legislations, and it is my hope with proper support and the support of this House, we are able to make that office what it ought to be. Whether or not I will be able to go to court to defend the government, Honorable Speaker, sir, and members of this committee, I will lead from the front. About CLE, I'd already talked about it. And I wouldn't want to go into the nuances of the report, but I think this is one of the issues that is captured. So once confirmed, I will go back and relook at those reports and review the two legislations that are pending before Parliament.
If confirmed.
I'm sorry, my lord. He almost made me think that had already been confirmed. Sorry. I'm sorry, sir. If confirmed, I will again go and relook at those two reports and look at the two legislations that are pending before this House, and it will be a priority, and I will be coming back to you with proposals, and I will be coming back to you to seek assistance. And you have helped me when I was in the office of the DPP. We couldn't have done it without you. Thank you.
Big pending cumulative awards.
Honorable Speaker, sir, and honorable members. I am informed and I know that some of these awards maybe are not big, but it is the interest that accrue, especially if it is compound interest. To enable me satisfactorily answer that, once, if I am confirmed, I undertake to take an audit of what is pending, the reasons why they are pending, the challenges in satisfying the orders, and I'll be able to give a satisfactory answer. Thank you.
Can we have Daoud, Honorable Mase, Honorable Mukami, those three? Then we'll be left with the remainder. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senior Counsel, you just mentioned that Constitution, you would consider Constitution changes if possible. I want to put it to you because I've given to our Speaker. I'm waiting for the legal counsel from Parliament to draft it. Would you consider that because of the Gen Zs, particularly now, I have made a suggestion where we need to do away with the Senate. I have said we do not need to have governors. We revert back probably to mayors of counties who would run the political angle of the county, whereas the administrative would have clerks like town clerks used to be there before. With that, then we establish a committee in Parliament, which in the National Assembly, by the way, when I say Parliament, I mean just National Assembly and not the Senate, where we would have a committee on devolution to take care of the counties so that we reduce all that baggage which is there, because basically Senate takes care of counties, which can be done by a committee of Parliament, of National Assembly. The same thing can be done. Would you consider something like that to be feasible for change of the law? I know it may involve the referendum or something. Secondly, the Office of the Public Trustee, until 3 months back, I never knew they would do a succession case, which has been done. There was a property I bought from somebody, and they had gone through a public trustee instead of going through succession in court, which takes a lot of money and time as well. But the problem was public trustee took more time than a succession cause. Would you consider devolving all, if you are approved, the public trustee to each and every county? Because currently what is there in our region is in the old provincial headquarters, that is Embu. Would you consider, and would you publicize it so that many people know that there is an office of public trustee which can do those cases, and I think they're practically free. There is not much involved in that. Would you consider that? Thank you.
Honorable Emase.
Thank you. Speaker, through you, my concern still goes to public participation. I know it's been mentioned, but I'm asking it in a different context. Nominee, the Attorney General's office is a lead coordinating agency on the realization of the draft Kenya policy and public participation. But Kenyans are dissatisfied with the manner in which we conduct public participation. And recently, most of the legislators have suffered in the hands of our constituents because they feel there was no transparent and accessible public participation. Now, in view of the public expectations, what are your thoughts on public participation? Because as it stands now, the committee conducting public participation sits in some boardroom or hotel in Nairobi, receives submissions from members of the public who are able to get to that venue, while those in far-flung areas are left with online avenue to send their submissions through email or whichever other means. So, in view of the dissatisfaction by the public, what are your thoughts about how we should conduct our public participation going forward? My second concern goes to the Advocates Complaints Commission and the Disciplinary Tribunal. Again, I put it to you that many Kenyans are suffering in the hands of rogue lawyers. They receive benefits on behalf of the clients, they squander. They are given services and paid, they don't deliver. And it takes almost forever for these Kenyans to get any redress. Are these institutions effective? Or what are you going to do, if approved, to ensure that Kenyans get redress when they find themselves in these situations? Thank you.
Honorable Mukami.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. To the nominee, the weakest link in the fight against corruption is the prosecution of persons accused of economic crimes. The other day, again, I went to Nyeri prison, and I realized that the most poor people, the young mothers, those who don't have lawyers to represent them, they're the ones who are rotting in jail. And yet, they have petty crimes. I would really like to know what you're going to do about it, if approved. Thank you.
Nominee, answer those three.
Thank you, Honorable Speakers and Honorable Members. As I had said before, we exercise liberal democracy by the people and for the people. And the rule of law requires that when we make laws, people must participate in making of laws. The laws must be available. The laws must be accessible. It is therefore my submission, Mr. Speaker, sir, as to what should be changed in the constitution or reviewed in the constitution will depend on what Kenyans will decide. I would therefore be happy if part of those recommendations are part of the things that Kenyans would recommend then they will take the natural legislative process. I'm not able to answer as a person because the process has to start from the people. But if accepted, they will be part of what will be reviewed. The Office of the Public Trustee. It is not that I will do or whether I will do. If approved to this position, I am aware that the Cabinet has directed the Office of the Attorney General to decentralize to the 47 counties. I am aware this is one of the people-facing departments whose services are required to the lowest level. It will therefore be my responsibility and priority to make sure that the Public Trustee Department is devolved and decentralized. Secondly, there is a need to conduct public education and awareness on the services being rendered by this department. If approved, I undertake from the first week to put in a mechanism where the Office of the Attorney General will conduct cafes. We did this from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, where every Friday would have an ODPP cafe, where the deputy directors, prosecution counsel, and even experts from outside would educate Kenyans. So I will approach it from the purview of strategic communication. I will involve the media, civil society, and Kenyans, and make sure that the services of the Office of the Attorney General are taken to the people, are unknown to the people. I also know that the rule of law requires that laws and procedures must be available in a language that we understand. There is a need, Mr. Speaker, sir, so many years after independence, all criminal laws and procedures and all laws are still in English. People cannot access them. Deaf people cannot access them. There is a need for us to make that law accessible in a manner and in a language that can be understood by the people. So there's also a need to make those services understandable and accessible in a manner that people can understand. Thanks.
Speaker, I just want clarification on the constitutional amendment which I've spoken about. The nominees.
Okay, he asked whether you will support a constitutional amendment.
Yeah, she has said it has to come from the public. So are you telling us that as legislators, if we bring that constitutional amendment, if it is approved through the speaker, that it may fail because of it has not originated from the public?
Both the honorable member and the nominee, the process of amending the constitution is defined in the constitution itself. It can't be any different. You can bring a constitutional amendment bill. You can go by way of popular initiative that will lead to a referendum. So none of you is limited in what you can do, except that it must be done in accordance with the constitution itself.
Okay. Because she just mentioned it will be done through public participation only.
No,
if I heard her right.
Did you say that, nominee?
Honorable sir, Honorable Speaker, sir, and members, I said it has to be by the people, and the House represents the people.
Go ahead.
I was asked about public participation. Riding from the recent court case, we have been guided that public participation should be meaningful and impactful. As to what should be public participation is where the problem is. And as I had said before, there is a need for us to come up with standards and involve the public to come up with standards and expectation of what public participation should be. And once we have that, we'll be able to direct and make sure that every legislation goes through the envisaged standard and expectation of the people.
Honorable Speaker, if I can.
Maybe if I can, I rarely participate at this level, but I want to ask you, what we are grappling with is we have bills that go through the bicameral process. Starts from the Senate, ends in the National Assembly, and vice versa. if you find favor and you become the Attorney General and the principal legal advisor to the government, assisting all institutions, including Parliament, what would be your view in a situation where courts are striking out legislation on the basis of public participation, but you'll find that a bill emanating from, say, the National Assembly has gone through the entire hog of public participation. Going to this, let me give you an example. We had the sugar bill, came from the National Assembly. The committee went to all the sugar growing areas, Ramisi, Rongo, Awendo, Mumias, Mohoroni, Miwani, Nzoia, all over. Picked views. The bill is passed, goes to the next house. Again, they pick it and embark on the same journey, going to Miwani to talk to the same people that National Assembly talked to, and so on and so forth. Would you, if you found favor and became the Attorney General, engineer a legislation that will give a threshold of public participation and find whether public participation by one house is public participation deemed to have been done by the other house, except where there are gaps? Or what would be your thinking? Yes, Emas.
And Honorable Speaker, it will become even more cumbersome because going by the recent pronouncements by the Court of Appeal while invalidating the Finance Bill 2023, now Parliament is obligated to do public participation on each and every amendment, even to an old bill, treating it as if it's a new one. So now we're asking ourselves, what exactly should this public participation entail? Are we going to be going back to the people every time we're doing each and every small thing? I think that needs serious clarification and thoughts.
Honorable Speaker, if you allow me to in on this.
Same issue?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Participation. Nominee, thank you that you're a lawyer of good standing. Probably you can help this country. Public participation. I read the judgment on the finance bill. They said we introduced new clauses on the floor of the House, which is actually the reason why third reading happens, you know, and no, the committee of the whole House, where we debate and, you know, say, no, let's change this, let's change this. But a court says we should not do that, you know. Every time I have an opportunity to introduce or to change a clause on the floor of the House, I have to take it to public participation. Then now come back again.
I take judicial notice that that matter is now pending before the Supreme Court, and therefore is sub judice.
Yes. But I also want to...
But you can talk about public participation in general terms, because the process consumes public resources and public time.
Yes.
When is public participation adequate for purposes of legislation?
Yes, on the same. And we have a situation where every judge now has his own set of what public participation should be, and therefore they bring out judgments on this is not public participation, and yet another court somewhere ruled on what public participation should be and should not. You are a good lawyer of good standing. I want to give that to you. How do you help this country?
Nominated from Honorable Posing. You know, that is a very emotive area now because it is causing a lot of rampers all over. Posing?
I agree with you, our senior, our speaker, that it is a very juicy area, particularly this of public participation. Because, and it's good that the nominee here is likely to become the next Attorney General, should she find favor of Parliament.
Don't prejudge.
If approved by Parliament.
If found fair, okay, yeah.
Yeah, she might be, Speaker, you don't know. I don't know also. But what I'm saying, Speaker, this might be an opportunity for her to listen to us as the people of Kenya, that public participation thing need to be thought about very clearly so that it doesn't curtail the role of parliamentarian. Because then if you say everything is public participation, including amendments at the committee of the whole House, which is provided for in Article 95. So what is going on? So I think, Honorable Speaker, this is a very juicy matter that the nominee, should she get a favor of Parliament, should dive into, as I call it, a low-hanging fruit. Otherwise, we will be confusing a country in terms of legislation.
Nominee, can
Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, sir, and members of this committee. Adequate or meaningful or impactful public participation will be public participation that corresponds with the requirements of the Constitution. Constitutionalism requires that if there are provisions in the Constitution and we need to practice them and to promote them, there has to be guidance in form of regulations, legislation, and policy. And that is the reason why it was my view that there is need for a policy, because from the seat of the executive, or if I'm confirmed as the Attorney General, it would be my duty to propose a policy to Cabinet and to instigate a process of policy making with a view to legislation. Then the legislation will come before this August House. So there is a need for regulation through policy and legislation.
If you find favor and become our Attorney General, that is one of the milestones we would look to you to assist Parliament. Within what period do you think you can be able to give the country a Public Participation Act, regulations, and rules?
If approved by this House,
yes,
and if appointed and sworn in to serve in the capacity of the Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya, 100 days.
We will hold you to that if you get there.
Yes. May I answer something about the Advocates Complaints Commission?
Yes.
The Advocates Complaints Commission is also under the Office of the Attorney General, but the Disciplinary Tribunal is not under the Attorney General. There is a need for the Office of the Attorney General to review the capacity, the structure of the Advocates Complaints Commission, because they only have one panel that is sitting now. If approved for this post, I would also think that there is a need for us to sieve the cases that go through the Complaints Commission so that the very trivial ones do not clog the system. We only deal with the more complex ones. But otherwise, there's a need to take an audit and come up with good resolutions on how we can structure the department. Thank you.
All the questions answered? Okay, so we can now move your question.
My
Which one?
questions.
By Honorable Mokami, I think it was about the mothers and vulnerable people who are in prison. Is it?
And the fight against corruption. Yeah, in the economic crime.
Do you remember it, nominee, or do you want her
Yes,
to repeat?
I do remember.
Okay.
Yes. About the mothers, the young people, and the children who are in custody, they are clients of the Director of Public Prosecutions, but the Director of the Public Prosecutions is using the tools that are available to him. So issues of expediting hearing of cases, issues of making pretrial detention shorter, legal representation, are not within the purview of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. And that is the reason why, as the Attorney General, this is an area that I'm passionate about. I am going to do all it takes to come back to this Parliament to persuade you that we need to relook at our criminal justice laws. I do not think, from the heart that I wear, that we are achieving the purposes of punishment, being retribution, rehabilitation, and restoration. Is the prosecution the weakest link in the fight against corruption? I was asked. The criminal justice system acts as a chain, and each one of us has a role to play. I know that the sector has been suffering from capacity, budgetary allocation, sometimes inadequate, insufficient investigations. If approved as the Attorney General, I will bring in other tools to help in the fight against corruption. One, we would strengthen the operationalization of Chapter 6 of the Constitution by clarifying what government agencies can do. We will use the forums that we have, like the NCAJ, where the Attorney General sits, to review the process of hearing of corruption cases. It has to be shortened, and I'm happy to report that as a prosecutor, I know the President has recommended shortening of the time that corruption cases should be heard. There is also a need for us to use a tool called asset forfeiture and confiscation so that we take out the profits from the accused persons. If that tool was used, we'll make crime to be less attractive to the accused persons. We will also try to share resources and enhance the capacity of the officers. So each of the criminal justice sector agencies is suffering from something, but if we work together collaboratively, supported by this House, we'll be able to put in mechanisms to deal with corruption. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Mishi, Honorable Raso, and Honorable Mule in that order.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Chairman, before my question, I also want to add what our nominee has just said, that it is one of the areas where if approved, she's going to put some reforms on the issue of presidential pardon. Because what we have been seeing, it is done politically. Those who have demonstrated that they have reformed and they need to have that presidential pardon, they don't access that. So while you say you have a passion on that area, on the prisoners, please also include the issue of presidential pardon. And Honorable Chairman, my question will also be on corruption, but in a different angle. And I just want to say that despite that we have so many laws regarding corruption, what are you going to ensure that there is consistently enforced? Because the problem here is enforcement, or rather implementation of the laws which have already legislated. And on the same perspective, how are you going to protect whistleblowers and witnesses who come forward with information about corrupt cases? On the same breath, one of the areas which we have found, there is a lot of corruption and wastages, it is on public procurement. So how are you going to ensure that you protect public funds? You also ensure there is transparency, there is accountability, so that at least the issue of austerity measure can be achieved. I thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Mishi. Raso, Honorable Raso.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Madam Senior Counsel, you rightly said justice is expensive. And indeed, it is in our country. Our courts or our judiciary borrows heavily from other jurisdictions. When you look at America, they have the People's Court, trial by jury. These are many areas that actually make it that the citizenry are able to access justice speedily. If you are confirmed, would you find it favorable to have battery of lawyers in the state law office, that Kenyans actually could go to the state law office and get counsels or advocates who can represent them in court in actually at a fee, where many Kenyans are able to access justice. Secondly, it is in the area of court reforms. If you look currently, there are many emerging issues: cyber crimes, cryptocurrency crime, bullying on the internet. There are many things that today is facing the world, and Kenyans are not exceptional to that. If you are confirmed by the House, would you find it favorable to actually have new courts that address these frontiers? These are teething issues to the Kenyan. And finally, what is your opinion on alternative dispute resolution? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Stephen Mule.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, nominee. The Office of Public Trustee operates within the organizational framework of the Division of the Administrator General in the Office of the Attorney General and the Department of Justice. Despite this, the public has limited access and knowledge of the public trustee services. What initiative are you going to put in place to communicate to the public to offer services from this office? And you know very well, the president has been on record saying that there has been very poor communication on what government is doing, it can do to the public. I want to hear your views.
Nominee, you can answer those three.
Presidential pardon. Honorable Speaker, sir, and honorable members. I was privileged to chair, on behalf of the Attorney General, presidential pardons for about 10 years before the Power of Mercy Committee. I can assure you, honorable speakers and honorable members, when I chaired on behalf of the Attorney General, we did what was required under the law. The Power of Mercy Committee falls under the Office of the Attorney General. I would expect that the Power of Mercy Committee acts in accordance with public interest, good governance, and in the interest of the administration of justice. From the information given today, if confirmed or if approved, that is one of the areas that we'll relook at on what legislation or how they dispense their mandate. The issue of corruption. Honorable Speaker and honorable members, corruption has been defined and corruption is a crime. The Director of Public Prosecution prosecutes what has been taken to him by investigating officers. The law requires him to either prosecute, to order further investigations, to take back or to close. I want to assume that whichever action that he takes, it is done in the public interest and in the interest of the administration of justice. Tools like whistleblower legislation are very important in the fight against corruption. I am informed, I am aware that a whistleblower legislation is underway and that will assist the fight against corruption. I am aware that the Witness Protection Agency is in place, but it lacks capacity. It was a department within the office of the DPP, but it was made independent. It is contributing to the fight against corruption and organized crime, but it lacks capacity. Since the Attorney General also superintends the Witness Protection Agency, we will review the structure and the requirements and the challenges of the Witness Protection Agency, and together with other justice actors, we will come back to you on the way forward, because I think it will still need budgetary allocation. Justice is expensive, and we need court reforms because of emerging issues. Honorable speakers and honorable members, we have emerging issues in criminal law and civil law, political and economic laws. However, issues like cryptocurrency have not yet been legislated or regulated. As we speak today, I am assisting a neighboring country to come up with regulations on virtual assets and virtual asset providers, which include cryptocurrency. I hope that if approved or confirmed to my position, I will use my expertise to recommend to government that we need regulations and laws in the new emerging areas. But we also must encourage alternative dispute resolution because it's provided for under the Constitution. They, to some extent, produce quality justice where courts is not involved and where the parties agree to go to alternative dispute resolution. And that is the reason why when it comes to criminal law, I was also speaking about alternatives to prosecutions that can be embraced, including diversion, deferred prosecution agreements, alternatives to trial, let's say plea bargaining, but in a way that it satisfies the administration of justice and public interest. Thank you. About public trustee, I had spoken about public trustee, but it is one of the services that, if confirmed as the Attorney General, as a quick win, we will make sure that it is cascaded to all the counties, 47 counties, and I hope that the Director of Public Prosecutions will be good enough to share his resources with us, even if we start with this one, because it will decrease the number of cases that go to court, and it will shorten the time within which we resolve issues. I also know that the public trustee is supposed to help mediation in inheritance matters, but since they are not on the ground, they cannot do that. So it is a very, very important service that should go to the people. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to follow up on what Honorable Rahab talked about women. And there is something I was bringing, but it was declared unconstitutional. A penal code. Would you consider, because she's talked about women in jails, and women go with young children to prison, would you consider bringing legislation to remove the children from the prison, under fives? How would you take it? So that we do not have women who are serving sentence with children under 5 in the prisons.
Chair, part of my question has not been answered.
Which one?
This is about the wastages on public procurement. And Chairman, I've asked this question because I'm putting a reference on what happened during the COVID-19 period, whereby we lost a lot of billions of money in terms of purchasing of masks. And I don't know how, as an AG, you're going to be advising the government in terms of public procurement. So I've not had any answers from her.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Senior Counsel, my follow-up question, which you did not really answer, is the issue of legal aid. To have battery of lawyers in the state law office so that many Kenyans can access justice, so that lawyers are affordable and individuals can approach any court. It doesn't matter who they are in society. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Speaker, there's someone who has asked me to ask this question, and I think it's a fundamental one. Nominee under the Office of the Attorney General Act, Section 15, the Solicitor General shall assist the Attorney General in the performance of the duties of the Attorney General, and it prescribes how. What do you think if the executive or the president overrides you or works directly to get advice from the Solicitor General and not from you if you are approved by this committee and the National Assembly?
About women in prison. Honorable speakers and honorable members, I know that women sometimes are detained in prisons and they have children. And I talked about the conditions of detention of vulnerable people within the criminal justice sector. It is not only women, but if you go to police stations and prisons, you'll hardly see detention facilities for children, for women, for men, demarcated, even for the disabled. So there is a need to relook at the whole criminal justice sector and the conditions of detention so that we can dignify people who go through them. Wastages of public, under public procurement. Honorable Speaker, sir, and members, public procurement is one area that gives birth to many cases of corruption. There is a need to ascertain that all MDAs and government institutions adhere to the requirements of Public Procurement Act, and it is the responsibility of the Attorney General to advise them on how to adhere to the requirements of the legislations. So it would be my duty to advise the MDAs and government agencies on what is required of them, should we find that the legislation is not adequate. For example, I know that under the Public Procurement Act, Section 134, contracts of above 5 billion are the ones that are approved by the Attorney General. The rest are done by the MDAs, but sometimes they end up to be the ones that have been more impactful negatively. So there will be a need to look at the whole of that regime and see how effective we can be. About the SG, I think if I'm confirmed as the Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya, I take the view that the Attorney General is the head of the functions that are prescribed under the Constitution. The structure and how the Attorney General's office will work will depend on how a particular Attorney General structures, because if you are an assistant, you are an assistant, everything goes by, with, and on the signature of the holder of the office. So it will depend on the structure. But if the functions are given to you by legislation, then you are answerable to them. So I think it will depend on personalities, not really, but the law as provided under the Constitution and legislation and regulation, and again on the structure and how the two offices work practically. Yes, thank you.
You think the law should be amended?
Yes, Mary?
Important concern. Honorable Speaker, through you, there's a lot of wastage of resources through litigation, MDAs taking each other to court, departments in one institution taking each other to court, and government ends up losing a lot of money. What are your thoughts about coming up with an alternative dispute resolution, where if it is a dispute between two ministries or departments, it can be resolved amicably through dialogue so that we can save money? Or like a case in point, Senate and National Assembly. Thank you.
Yes, nominee.
I totally agree that the first point of call should be alternative dispute resolution. Thank you.
Yeah, now we're approaching the end, nominee. Yeah, there's immense interest from the public in this process. We have received not less than, we have received 25 messages coming from the public. Some overlap, some you have talked to, some you have answered, and some are identical. So they have asked the Deputy Speaker to sieve out a few and put them to you before I come to one or two things. Deputy Speaker.
Okay, Honorable Speaker, I think, as you said, there's 25 questions, and when I went through them, a lot of them have already been covered by the nominee through the questions by the honorable members, but there are just two that stand out that haven't been answered. Three actually haven't been answered yet. One is it says that Kenya's legal framework still includes outdated laws that are inconsistent with the 2010 Constitution. As Attorney General, what's your plan for reviewing and updating these laws? And then the other one is international trade agreements. It's international trade agreements. It's Kenya's involvement in international trade agreements, such as the Economic Partnership Agreement with the European Union and the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, has significant legal implications because Kenya will need to align its trade tariffs, laws, and so on with that particular international agreement. How will you advise the government on how to go about aligning with this agreement and at the same time protecting Kenya's local industries? The third one was addressed to me by a gentleman called Elvis, who's from Wasingishu County, who is currently in a jail in Indonesia, has served a sentence for 10 years and has received parole, and therefore he's supposed to be released. But unfortunately, there's an agreement that's supposed to be between Kenya and Indonesia in order to be able to have him released. Apparently, Kenya hasn't signed that agreement. I have personally actually gone to the Githu Muigai as Attorney General, Kihara Kariuki as Attorney General, and even recently the current Attorney General. So he's just told me he probably is in luck if we have a woman. Maybe a woman will make a difference and help him get out of jail. And the other one is the issue about Kenya School of Law. You've already answered it, but the person has just added the question different from what the others have asked, saying that Kenya School of Law previously, as designed, used to be for students who had foreign law degrees and needed to customize their learning, like to learn civil procedure of Kenya, criminal procedure of Kenya. But today, all students, foreign and local, go to the Kenya School of Law. So they study civil procedure at degree level in the university for a whole year. Then they are re-examined again at Kenya School of Law. They study civil procedure for 3 months and are examined, and then they fail. Yet they had passed it at degree level, and now they're being told they're failed at diploma level, and they think that it's just now a money-making scheme by those people who run the Kenya School of Law. So some are questions, some are statements, but you can comment on them so that the public knows that you're with them. Thank you.
The first one was that the Kenya legal framework, many laws are obsolete. It is true. I serve as a commissioner at Kenya Law Reform Commission, and the Kenya Law Reform Commission is going to fall under the Attorney General. There is an initiative now of checking all the obsolete laws and the ones that are not responsive to the Constitution. We will enhance that initiative. If I take the example of criminal laws, we still have laws like drunk and disorderly, loitering, and in Mombasa there's one called Maineo. We should not be crimes at all. So there is an initiative by the Law Reform Commission because mostly they take in the young people and the vulnerable. And these are not laws that should not be.
We still have also a law called rogues and vagabonds.
That is correct. And
when a policeman takes you to court, the only evidence that you didn't have money.
And Honorable Speaker, sir, these laws were made during colonial periods because they were supposed to curtail the movement of Africans. But they have found their way to this era. We have to relook at those laws. And it is my view, and it is our view as the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, that there are many laws that we should decriminalize. So the Kenya Law Reform Commission is working on it. And as if confirmed as the Attorney General, I will put that as an initiative. About the trade agreements, I'm not seized of the matter, so I'll not be able to know or juxtapose the facts and the law to know where the challenge is. The person who's been in custody for 10 years, unfortunately, Honorable Speaker, sir, I'm the one who spearheaded the Transfer of Prisoners Act, and I know the requirements under the Act. So we have the Act, but we are required to have bilateral agreements with a country before we can enforce. So I think that is what is missing and should be relooked into. Issues of Kenya School of Law are spoken to. I think it is a very volatile issue. And some of these issues being brought forward were covered by the 2 reports I've talked about, and they are part of the 2 legislations that are pending before Parliament. And I've said I'll make it a priority if confirmed. I remember.
Thank you. Yes.
Just a clarification. When she was doing her introduction and her performance in the offices, I had her talk about Toti. They said Toti as a charge. Did she mean to say that
touting? You mean?
Touting.
Yes.
Did she mean to say that the office of the ODPP has suggested that touting should not be charged? Or I thought I had maybe just a clarification.
Honorable Speaker, sir, and honorable members, when a prosecutor is making a decision to charge, apart from sufficiency of evidence, apart from passing the public interest test, and apart from knowing that there is a reasonable prospect of conviction, we are supposed to consider whether the punishment is meaningful, whether it is serving the administration of justice. Touting is an unmoved crime where you just make noise at a bus stop. We fill our jails with these people. We think that there is a mechanism because the Matatu started having SACCOs. So the Director of Public Prosecutions directed that we could divert those cases to SACCOs to deal with. And I think the Director of Public Prosecutions is allowed under the law to divert cases that should not go through the system. And I repeat again that not all cases where there is evidence, there should be prosecution.
That is correct. Now, nominee, let me start from there. In the old days, local authorities that have been succeeded by county governments used to have local codes for dealing with minor things like nuisance, licensing, and so on. And many of them used to help generate revenue, but also did not carry custodial penalties at every level. To decongest the clog of work at the ODPP, I know it's an independent office, but you are the principal legal advisor to the entire government. Would you consider looking at the possibility of decongesting the mainstream courts and the ODPP by giving some limited role of counties to deal with cases of licensing, nuisance, what the touts you are talking about, the most you can charge them is public nuisance, and all those that can be dealt with without attracting custodial penalties. Secondly, the point raised by Russell, I have been advised, and I believe it to be true, that in our neighbor, Tanzania, the Office of the Attorney General is a big law firm. You advise the government, but you also assist the people, especially in cases where citizens are engaged in a legal tussle without involving the state. So the Attorney General's office will have no dog in that fight. Would you consider a situation where you revamp the Office of the Attorney General, have branches in counties, and assist wananchi who have issues against each other? Somebody comes to the AG's office, some Bwenyenye somewhere is dispossessing them of their land, and your lawyers help to defend them at nominal fees, instead of leaving them to the vagaries of very expensive legal practitioners and so on and so forth. Thirdly, the Office of Public Trustee that Mule talked about is a very important office. When we talk about the Attorney General, you can see we have concentrated on prosecutions and all those other things. The Office of Public Trustee is critical in helping the poor, the weak in society, who are routinely dispossessed of their inheritance by those who have capacity and money because they cannot afford to have legal representation. Some of them go to chiefs. Chiefs also have their own weaknesses, and so on and so forth. How will you revamp the Office of the Public Trustee to be able to help, one, proper communication to the public, that you exist, and what you can do so that people know where you are, who you are, and how to come to you for assistance, so that they can be able to deal with their inheritance issues. Thirdly, it may be a comment or a question. One of the issues, nominee, that you'll have to also address is the complex agreements and contracts that the government enters. You remember the mega scams in this country, Anglo Leasing, Goldenberg, name it. When the suspects go to court, their defense is always the Attorney General approved, the Attorney General advised, the Attorney General signed. And the country ends up losing billions and billions of shillings. And because of the manner in which the Attorney General either advised or signed or approved, the criminals who have frisked money from the coffers of the public go scot-free. What are you going to do differently if you are approved that will help save the country in this regard? Because every single government transaction ends up on the Attorney General's desk for approval or for opinion. Will you have the time, if you are approved, to have sufficient capacity On alone, you can't do it. You must have good lawyers. The Office of the Attorney General is notorious for not paying well to its lawyers. And that's why many of the lawyers start there and eventually they scatter into private practice. What will you do to attract the best within the market and do the best for the country? Yes, Russell.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Just a quick one. Company X, I'm just withholding the name because this is specific, is having a fraud case that has been lying at the ODPP's office for 4 years without anyone taken to court. The company is now under liquidation. What is the comment of the nominee? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Respond to those. Let her finish that first.
The first question was whether the DPP would be minded to cede some of his powers to courts, to county courts, to deal with minor offenses.
You don't even cede power, you delegate. That's not ceding.
Honorable Speaker, sir, and honorable members of this committee, the ODPP has come up with delegated prosecution guidelines where we delegate to other agencies prosecution mandate.
Public, make it known.
That is correct. We'll make it public, we'll make it known. I will, if approved, I will consult with other actors and see whether that is one of the avenues that can be employed.
Yes.
The Office of the Attorney General is supposed to be the lawyer for the people. And in fact, that is why I talked about National Legal Aid Services. It has to be operationalized. And it is targeting indigent people, the vulnerable people. So if that is operationalized, we will need counsel to implement. If approved, I vision the Office of the Attorney General that it is represented in all the 47 counties and in all the court stations, that is accessible, that is available, that can give legal advice to all Kenyans when and at a place that is required. I had already spoken about the public trustee. I understand. If approved to this position, that is one of the areas that we'll have to work on very fast, but already Cabinet has ordered that the services of the Office of the Attorney General must be taken to the counties, and they're working on it. About complex agreements and contracts. If you find favor with me, I think this is one area where the Attorney General must consult with Cabinet to agree that there has to be standards on how contracts are drafted. There has to be a central place which ensures quality assurance, because what we talk about here is a matter of quality, not quantity. There is a need that every public officer who acts on behalf of government is acting in the public interest and in the interest of administration of justice. So there is a need of a mechanism that ensures quality and then ensures that the decision-making or the regulation that is superintending contract agreements and complex contracts and agreements is known by all MDAs, is adhered to, is monitored, and in case of violation, appropriate action is taken.
One or two more before I give to Mary. Somebody from says, good afternoon. Please ask the nominee for AG to explain how she'll help poor people who lost money through pyramid schemes, commonly known as DECI, when the government collected the money through unclaimed assets. Not that. A senior citizen called Sammy Louis says, there is a 64-page document that was compiled jointly by the Minister of Devolution and Planning and Council of Governors in 2016 County Public Participation Guidelines, which could be of help to the Attorney General nominee in clarifying what public participation should entail. I'll give you one more. Ask the AG nominee whether she envisions a criminal justice system where all parties have adequate legal representation in cases where accused parties don't have lawyers. Is it possible to have a public defender? I think this you have talked about. Then ask the AG nominee if she has plans of having Kenya Sign Language interpreters at the state law office to serve the deaf. And lastly, that is a compliment to the committee, not to you. And lastly, somebody has sent a message that the recent protests by the Gen Z brought to question the issue of realization of the right to picket vis-a-vis the role of security organs to enforce order. What, in your view, should be done to ensure the realization of the right to picket and maintenance of public order? Can you respond to those? Mary, you'll then come in.
Thank you, honorable speakers and honorable members. I had been asked a question about a matter that has been pending in the office of the DPP for 4 years. I'm not seized of the matter, so I will not be able to respond. How the Office of the Attorney General would help poor people who have lost money. Honorable Speaker, sir, and honorable members, I talked about the Asset Recovery Agency. One of the mandate of the Asset Recovery Agency is to recover monies that are tainted from criminals, even if they are not prosecuted. This is an area that the Attorney General, if confirmed, should work together with the Director of Public Prosecutions and investigative agencies. If these cases are not viable through the through prosecution system, then they have to be dealt with through civil asset forfeiture and confiscation, and we'll consider that. About the 64-page document, it can be sent, if approved, it will be sent to us.
Look for it.
I will look for it, sir.
Yeah.
Criminal justice sector where all parties. Honorable Speaker, sir.
It's the same thing we talked about.
Yes, yes.
Growing your office to a big public law firm.
Yes, sir.
Supporting not only the government, but the people of the country as well.
Yes, sir.
Whatever departments you call it, but people need help.
That is true, sir. I totally agree. About protest by the Gen Z, about Kenya Sign Language, I'd spoken about a requirement or an attribute of the rule of law that requires that laws must be available, accessible, in a language and in a manner that is accessible to the people. And sign language is one of such manners, one of such languages that the law should be available. So I think this is an area to consider.
The last issue that I mentioned about picketing and so on,
yes.
Constitutional right.
Yes.
If you go to a country like UK,
yes.
there are demonstrations every single day.
Yes.
But they have designated areas. If you go to UN, I'm sure you have gone to the UN to attend meetings. Just across the street near the Trump Tower and other buildings there, there's a place there where people stand there, shout at presidents of countries they don't like, and do all sorts of things the whole day without disrupting law and order. And they end up going home. In the UK, you go to Hyde Park, insult the prime minister, insult everybody, say your obscenities, you finish, you go home. And nobody bothers. You go to the House of Commons, across the road, you find a group of people demonstrating, displaying placards. Work is going on. As Attorney General, how do you, by law and public awareness and communication, assist the country that those who want to demonstrate and make their views known have the right to do so, but they have no right to disrupt the life cycle of others. We should not have a situation where, because I want to demonstrate, you have to close your shop. Because I want to demonstrate, you have to close your school. Because I want to demonstrate, you have to abandon your work and go home early or not leave your house at all. Demonstrations are not supposed to be nightmares. There are processes of people actively and openly expressing their views. As Attorney General, what's your view on this?
Honorable Speaker, sir, and members, Honorable Speaker, you have assisted me in answering that question. Communication and public awareness, both to the law enforcement agencies and to the citizen. I know that should there be a public demonstration, when you commit a criminal offense, you take individual responsibility for your action. Therefore, picketing and committing criminal offenses is different. But I agree that there is a need for clarification, public awareness, and sensitization on the parameters of exercising those rights under the Constitution, since they don't fall under those rights that cannot be derogated. Thanks.
Yes, Mary Massey.
Chairman, I want to ask a question that has been sent to me by a Kenyan. Honorable nominee, the question is, considering the tragic events that unfolded in Shakahola, which highlighted the dangerous influence of unchecked religious cults, what specific legal framework do you propose to regulate religious organizations without infringing on constitutional freedoms? How do you intend to ensure that such regulations are enforced effectively across all religions, including remote areas where oversight is often lacking? And the second one is on registration of companies. This Kenyan is saying, given the current bureaucratic delays and regulatory challenges in the registration of both foreign and local companies in Kenya, which hinder economic growth and deter foreign investment, what comprehensive reforms do you plan to implement to streamline this process? How will you ensure that these reforms reduce the timelines and enhance transparency without compromising the integrity of the registration process? Thank you.
Yes, nominee, can you answer those, and those will be the last? I don't want any other member to raise your hands.
Honorable Speaker, sir, about business registration, if confirmed, then it would be my responsibility to re-engineer the processes and procedures in that department to make sure that it provides timely, efficient services to the public. Appearing before you today, I'm not seized with the challenges that they face, so I'm not able to say exactly how I will respond, but it will be one of the things that we shall review and look at wholly. The other question was on remind me of the first question, sir.
From Mary.
From the Kenyan.
Shakahola
and
the
regulation
possible,
of religious leader. Yeah. Honorable Speaker, sir, and honorable members of this committee, I am aware, like any other Kenyans, that there was a task force and they have presented their report to the president. If confirmed to this position, I'm sure I'll be part of the public officers that will be given responsibility to implement the recommendations of that report. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, nominee. We're coming to the end of our engagement with you. I'll ask you one or two final questions. Have you ever been adversely mentioned in any integrity-related report or investigations?
No, sir.
Do you hold any leadership position in any political party within Kenya?
No, sir.
Do you hold citizenship of any other country other than Kenya?
No, sir.
What is your net worth in terms of personal fortune?
Honorable Speaker, sir, my family net worth, because since my late husband died, we have not distributed amongst my children. So the total family worth is 85 million.
85 million. Made of?
I have I have an OGW, Order of the Grand Warrior of Kenya, EBS, Elder.
What is the 85 million is
Made of?
Made of? Is it cars? Is it land?
Part of it is land.
Is it houses?
It is land.
Is it shares? Cash in the bank?
It is land. It is house. It is houses and a car.
And a car. Thank you. There are people who send in memorandum against you. One called Eliud Karanja Matindi, Dennis Kangeti Itui, Charles Idaho. But we find the memorandum they have sent against you all irrelevant to your being considered for suitability. There's one that came through questions and you responded, and you also wrote to us about it. So we come to an end of our engagement, and we wish you well.
Honorable Speaker, I had
checked
something
your
to say.
documents. Yes or no? We checked your documents against what we have on you.
Yes.
We found them to be in order. You're saying something?
Yes, Honorable Speaker, sir. I wanted to say that in considering me to this position, I am an alumni of the inaugural and highest level leadership program of national transformation that is offered by the Kenya School of Government. It is a new program which is thoughtfully designed to develop the competencies of higher level public officials to formulate innovative policies and strategies that should culminate in the transformation of our country into developed, industrialized nation akin to the newly industrialized economies. This program, just like its predecessor course SLDP and SMC, is meant to imbue patriotism, commitment to upholding and stewarding the common good of society, and unwavering obligation to steer evidence-based transformation in our varied leadership position. I am in the first cohort of that program, and we are only
What is
7.
the name of that course, the title of the course?
It's called Leadership Program for National Transformation Program.
Okay.
It is the highest course offered by Kenya School of Government. I'm in the first cohort. We are only 7, including 1 minister from Somali. And it is a course that all of us should consider, because if you go through that course, it impacts your leadership skills. Honorable Speaker, sir, let me thank you for listening to me. And Honorable Speaker, sir, from what I have said, it is clear that I've been favored and graced. This country has done a lot to me, and I think I owe the country service. Thank you.
Thank you, nominee Dorcas Agik Odwor. We've come to the end of this interaction, and unless you are otherwise lawfully held, you are discharged to go back to your duties.
Thank you.
Sergeant, you get first the documents of the nominee and give them back to her. Then assist the nominee to escort her back to, and I see you're armed with Tom Onyango, senior lawyer, senior to you, but junior to me.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Honorable members, we got an accolade from a gentleman called Linus Kaikai, which you all know. He says, very well done. You are more judge here than speaker. I must say you are running such a just and fair court. That is not my compliment, it's for all of you. Yes. Honorable members, we'll now adjourn. This is the end of today's engagement. We will, the clerk has some lunch for you. The fourth estate members, you're invited. You'll be told where to have the lunch. You will meet honorable members in this chamber on Tuesday at 8. Tuesday at 8. But because of traffic and other things, I prefer to invite you for breakfast at 7. Then at 8, we come here for the meeting so that you don't say you are caught up in the traffic. Breakfast will be served at 7. We can all do breakfast, then come here to look at the draft report. If we find it appropriate and reflective of what we have gone through, then we prepare Tuesday afternoon, we table the report, and the rest will follow. Yes, Mary?
Honorable Speaker, I was going to suggest, since we only have 2 nominees, the media would have excused us and the staff. We make the decision and we leave our secretariat to go write the report. We just come and adopt.
No, we will only act on the basis of a draft report from the secretariat.
I stand,
We have not
I
draft
stand guided.
We have
I
not
stand
draft
guided.
report before us.
This is not test was out.
And we don't want to
This
create an
parliament.
impression that we came here with preconceived decisions. So, go for lunch.
Lokichar, Kanamkamer, Takwel, Kakuma, Lodwa, Loima, Lokichogyo, Lokiriama, Kalokol, Lobei. Turkana is watching.